Social networking is one of the hottest topics in marketing today, and we're going to talk about how we measure the value of social networking. But first, we have to define what we mean by value. When we talk about value, Marketing Evolution always looks at sales as a key issue or key objective of any marketing. But beyond the value of sales, we also want to understand how social networks create positive brand perceptions, advocacy, and loyalty. These might also be goals of your marketing campaign. Before we begin to talk about social networking and the value it creates, we need to really understand the value of what we're comparing it against, which is the old model. So let's take a look at the old model of value creation in advertising and the new model of value creation that we're seeing in social networking. The best way to describe these differences is to think about the old model as being a business-to-consumer model. That means that a business takes and advertises to an audience of consumers. That act of advertising to it is usually a broadcast message that's delivered to an audience. Now, when you look at the fundamentals in this monitor here, we can see that you might advertise to a handful of people, but only influence a small subset of those people. For example, in this chart here, we see 10 different people who are advertised, and 2 of them that actually change their attitudes towards that brand. Well, 2 out of 10 is actually pretty good for advertising. Let's put it in actual context. 2 out of 100 is more like it. Now you might look at that and say, wow, traditional advertising, that's really inefficient. Well, the reality is, in fact, that the traditional model actually is a pretty good ROI. If you advertise to 1,000 people, it may only cost you $10. That would be a $10 CPM. And if you're influencing 2 people out of 100, or 20 per 1,000, that actually comes out to be a cost of 50 cents per person you're impacting, what we call a 50-cent CPI, or cost per impact. And actually, that's a pretty good deal for a lot of marketers in terms of influencing consumers. So we're not here to say the traditional model is dead or no longer works. We're here to understand how the new model works and how that's different from the traditional model of a business advertising to consumers in an audience form and trying to influence a subset of them. Let's contrast that with the social network model. The social network model can best be described as a consumer-to-consumer communication. In other words, one consumer gets a message and decides to pass it along to their friends in hope that they will perhaps interact with that brand. And even if the consumers don't interact with the brand, the act of passing along that message, or a consumer seeing that message shared by one of their friends, that in and of itself may create value. At least that's the premise. We'll look at some research to see whether in fact that happens. So let's give a specific example. When I launched the book What Sticks, I was told that I ought to have a social network page, and so we did. So this is an example of that page. I might want to go on and change my page and tell a little bit more about myself through my love of Adidas and all of their great products. So for the purpose of this case example, we're talking about Adidas. Imagine for a moment that this is how I redid my page, and I put the fact that I was totally into Adidas and racing and soccer cleats and so forth up in that product. That gives other people a chance to experience the Adidas brand as they visit my social page to talk about the book What Sticks. Let's talk about specifically what's in fact happening in terms of the way in which consumers are interacting with it. About 600,000 people downloaded the content from the Adidas page over the course of a month. We're going to talk a little bit later about how advertising helped make that number higher than it would have been if you didn't have advertising. 600,000 people visited that custom community, and out of that, 75,000 of them downloaded content that they could put on their own personal page, such as an Adidas logo. That's one of many examples of things that you could do once you're within the Adidas custom community. About 85% of those, in fact, actually not only downloaded, but put it on their custom web page. Some of those passed it along to friends, and then there was value created through that. There's also value created by the people that received the pass along from one of their friends. And of course, some of those people that received it may in turn visit the custom community, and some of those may in fact decide to download it themselves for use on their own page. What you're seeing here is a network of value that's being created, consumer to consumer, as information is passed along. There's another part of this value creation, an important part of this value creation, and that is the mere viewing of the content on someone else's page. Up until this research, most of the focus had been about how those people then in fact converted over to view the custom community and perhaps download their own content and information. But what we found was that in fact many of the people didn't do any of that. They didn't become part of the 600,000 people that visited the custom community. They got value simply by seeing the Adidas brand on someone else's page. Well, how important are those numbers? Well, each of these bubbles is roughly representative of the size of activity. So let's put this blue bubble in context. It dwarfs everything else. It's 21.5 million people. And in fact, what we saw was value was created by them seeing the Adidas brand on someone else's page. And because that value is created there, we call this the momentum effect. It is a much larger effect than the direct interaction that the brand might get from a consumer. And it is one of the keys to understanding how to leverage social media effectively. Let's talk about the momentum effect in greater detail. Take the brand perception as a brand I love. Adidas would like to have more people that saw Adidas as a brand that they love. It's a key objective of their advertising and marketing. Now, advertising can in fact increase perceptions of brand I love in a number of different ways. In fact, we were able to isolate and quantify that the advertising during this campaign generated an increase in 2 million people feeling that the Adidas brand was a brand that they loved. Good, successful advertising. The way that advertising contributes to social networking is that advertising done right can drive people into the social media to engage with the brand. This part of this advertising campaign included 500 million impressions across different social networks such as MySpace to boost the number of people visiting the custom community. And that worked. It generated about half the traffic to the custom community. And those people in turn took content out of the social network and put it onto their own homepage, their own custom community page, and by doing that allowed some of their friends to experience the Adidas brand through what we would call the momentum effect. And that generated 1.9 million people incrementally that saw Adidas as a brand that they love. And that in fact is the power of social media and the momentum effect. Working in tandem with advertising, you can create the maximum impact in social media. So what are some of the keys to unlocking the momentum effect and getting the full impact? Well, the most important part is to look at your custom community and ask yourselves, am I doing things that people would want to take out of my custom community and put in their own personal property? And if the answer is yes, then you're probably doing many things right. The key when we look at consumer motivations for taking content out of someone's custom community, usually it needs to be an authentic need anchored in a perception that this is a way of telling their own personal story. In the example that I gave earlier, I genuinely am into race cars, and Adidas genuinely has great products, great shoes that I like to drive when I'm driving really fast on a racetrack. That's a genuine part of the Adidas brand and one that's very easy for me to adopt and share and put into a custom community. Think about those kind of things with your consumers. What are their points of passion and how do you help your brand highlight those points of passion and bring those to life? There are other alternatives. Research that we've done with consumer packaged goods showed that sometimes there isn't as strong of passion about the brand, but you can leverage other ways of engaging with the brand. If you're interested in some of those examples, we've written a paper called The Momentum Effect, and it's available at our website, www.marketingevolution.com.